I'd like to welcome everyone that's online and those in the room to our Wildlife Board meeting as of August 22nd, 2024. That's, appreciate everybody being here that's here and those online too. We just have a couple items to talk about today. But first off, we'll do some introductions. We'll start down with Brett.
Brett Selman from the Northern Region.
Gary Nelson, Central.
Randy Dirth from the Northeast Region.
Paula Richmond, Southern.
Kent Johnson, Southeastern Region.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate you being online with us today also. I apologize. Sorry you couldn't be here. We miss you, but we understand. So appreciate you joining us today. We will not have any, we'll dispense with the minutes meeting because of the minutes. So let's just go to the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or modifications to the agenda? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Gary, second by Paula. Let's go with a roll call vote. Since Kent, we'll start with you. You want to?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Our first item is a CWMU over objective permit request. So we'll actually turn some time to Chad Wilson. Chad's our wildlife coordinator.
Yeah, Chad Wilson, private lands, public wildlife coordinator. So yeah, we just wanted to go over some requests for additional permits on CWMUs. Back in January, or not in January, in June. We'll see if this works. It's not forwarding. Okay. So back in June, the board approved the new CWMU rule. Part of that approval was some tools that we can use on units that are over objective. And so some of those tools include authorizing a second antlerless elk permit for hunters on antlered and antlerless permits, calling a depredation hunt, issuing private vouchers that are not for profit, adding an emergency hunt at the end of the year, having a harvest objective set by the DWR, and requiring a unit-wide plan to be presented before the CWMU Advisory Committee. This was pretty quick turnaround, but there's a couple of units that we felt like we could take advantage of some of these tools potentially this fall. And so that's what we're coming here to ask for permission on some of these. And those two units would be the Morgan South Rich unit and the Chalk Creek unit. So you can see both of these are quite a bit over objective. So over the last 3 years, Morgan South Rich is averaging 53% over objective and Chalk Creek 31%. So with that, we have these CWMUs that we're recommending the following tools be implemented. On Deseret, that we have an antlerless elk permit purchase option for all permit holders up there. So antlered and antlerless, and to set a harvest objective of 300 for this fall. Ensign Ranches to have antlerless permit purchase for those that are for the antlerless hunters. And then for East Fork, Chalk Creek, Grass Valley, Clark Canyon, and Weber Florence Creek, Stillman Creek, to have an antlerless elk for all permit holders on those as well. And this would be something that generally going forward in the future, we'll bring these sorts of recommendations through in the spring, and they'll go through the RAC and the board. But with the timing on this, we wanted to take this into the board, see if we could get approval for this fall, and then have a more entailing presentation in the spring for next year. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. I just have one question. When that says for all hunters, is that for all deer and elk hunters?
Yeah, for all, yeah. So like Deseret's got pronghorn and moose hunters too. They'd have the option of getting the cow tag.
Okay, so for all hunters.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Chad, on that Ensign Ranches where it says purchase option for antlerless hunters. Is that so people who already have a cow tag can buy another one?
Yep.
Is that what, okay. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chad?
Chad, I just want to thank you guys for working with these landowners. I mean, I know it's been a big deal for quite a few years and you guys have worked good. It seemed like everybody's kind of come to the table. They want to fix the problem. So there's been a lot of good support. So anyway, thanks for what you've done on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Chad? No, we appreciate you diving in this so quickly. Thank you. That's all. Entertain a motion on this agenda item.
I make a motion, we approve it as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Bryce, second by Brett. Let's go, we'll do a roll call vote. Let's start with Kent.
Yes.
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 Motion approved. Thank you, Chad. Our next agenda item is a administration rule hearing. That will not start for about approximately 10 minutes. We'll start that precisely at 10 o'clock. So we'll just take a break for the next 10 minutes and start that at 10 o'clock. That work? Okay, thank you. Would like to welcome everyone back to the Wildlife Board meeting. Today is August 22nd, 2024. We'll start with the next agenda item, which is administrative rule hearing for the Kimberly CWMU. I'm not sure how we want to start, whether Mr. Labram, if you want to start off, or if we want Kyle to start off. What is the best procedure here? I should have checked ahead of time.
Oh, whatever's fine with the board. If you want to let Mr. Labram go first as the applicant or the
Yeah,
requester.
let's do that.
That's fine. Yeah. And I was just saying, I've never been involved in this type of hearing. So procedurally, I'll just kind of do whatever, as far as if you guys want me to kind of talk for a minute and then ask questions, or however you guys want to do it. I think in our discussions where this is an informal, it's a hearing, but an informal structure, it can be a lot of just discussion and speaking with the biologist and myself and the state, and more just kind of a discussion on the appeal.
Yes, yeah, we'll
So-
I guess get up and give us your spiel of what you'd like to, why you're asking for the
Okay.
appeal on this thing, and give us a reason, and I'm sure
Okay.
we'll ask questions, and then we'll probably turn some time to Kyle and let him do the same thing and ask him questions, and then we'll go back and forth a little bit, I
Thank
think,
you.
until we figure out what we want to do.
Okay. Thanks. All right. I appreciate it. I'm going to try and not make the speech part of this too long, because I think the discussion part's going to be where we kind of get things figured out. But first is, let me say, and I understand the reason we're having this meeting today is because of my appeal. And it's not lost on me that everyone traveled a long ways to get here and took a Thursday out of their week to do this. So I really do appreciate that. I know everybody's pretty busy, so this means a lot that you're all here. I'm going to be real quick and just give you a background. I don't know if you guys know our background. I put it in, there was a lot of nice briefs that you guys got to read between two attorneys that were pages and pages long. So, but my family has been owner operators of the Old Woman Plateau CWMU since the program started. And I think it was in 94 or somewhere right about there. So close to 30 years the program's been going, and we've had an under acreage CWMU since the day it started. We have just over 8,000 acres, and I guess the word grandfathered in has come in a lot. Our setup is we have like 6,300 acres in one piece of ground, and then we have 2,000 acres that sits almost a mile and a half away from the other piece. They're not so our biggest piece we hunt is 6,300 acres, and then we hunt 2,000 acres. So for 30 years, we've been having successful elk hunts on 6,300 acres and 2,000 acres over here that don't even touch. And our hunter success is through the roof. I mean, I think we're hunter satisfaction in high 90s. I mean, we know what it takes to have high quality ground that you hunt that doesn't meet the acreage requirement. We are the people the public that draw our tags, they hunt right in the middle of the rut. I mean, we understand that. I mean, you get these guys in there and you provide the most amazing hunt you can provide. And so our draw hunters hunt right in the middle of the rut. Our draw hunters come back 3, 4, 5 times sometimes if they don't see what they want, or they get shooting and miss. And so we have 30 years of experience doing this on under acreage CWMUs. And a lot of it too is we've put a lot of money in habitat. We've been partnering with Natural Resources, Forest Service, DWR. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in habitat and water lines and water holes and burning and reseeds. And I mean, we love this program. And so I didn't know if you knew our background, but that's our background. This particular piece of ground on the Kimberly, we saw it come up for sale. And the owners before us had a big engineering plan on this property. They had a ski resort planned. They had cabins, condos. This property was going to be a ski resort and condos, and this property was going to go away. And when it comes to habitat, I mean, and so our family being from Utah, my family's all from the Uinta Basin, the Labrums. We've grown up in Utah. We're hunters. We got together and said, we're going to buy this property. And our main goal, plan A, is we're going to turn this into a hunting unit. We're going to keep this land as habitat and hunting. And so that's what we did. We got some investors together. We have some partners. We went in, purchased the property, and we have been driving that direction since the day we bought it. Now it's definitely not lost on me why we're here and the conversation between small acreages versus large acreages and elk habitat. And so I guess what we see in our experience over 30 years of doing this, on our other property, the elk keep coming back year after year. 30 years we've been successfully killing big bulls on this other property. And you're talking about 6,300 acres. And we hunt these bulls for 8 straight days, these elk on this other property. And how it's kind of split is the 6,300s on a higher elevation, pines, quakies, and the 2,000 sits more kind of off in the bluffs to where the bulls will come winter. And so the elk kind of move from one closer to the other as the season goes. So for September, we're hunting 6,300 acres in September for the entire month. And I'll bet we'll kill 6-7 bulls on 6,300 acres, and the elk don't leave. They know where the hunting pressure is. They know where the water is. They know where the habitat's been improved. We'll go in and hunt bulls. And if we shoot or kill a bull, the elk will run over the ridge and end up in the next canyon on the private. And that's just what they do. They know where there's hunt. They know where the high pressure is around. They know where all the water is and the habitat that's been improved. And we've been doing it for 30 years. We are living proof that you can successfully hunt smaller acreage rants for elk if the habitat is high quality. And so that's what the beaver is. And I'll put this up. I want to show you guys. I wanted to get as many of you down to the beaver as I could over the summer, but unfortunately there was a giant fire down there and they closed all the roads. So we couldn't even, they had the roads closed going in. We couldn't even get anybody in there. And so that plan kind of went the wayside. So I brought just some pictures of this property just so that we could at least look. And okay, so here is looking up into, there's probably 70% of the ranch right here. And you're talking about great, big, deep pine, quaky water. I mean, these canyons, when you hunt a canyon in this property, those elk don't run 5 miles away. I mean, half the time they don't even, we've been in there and we've had, I don't know if in the last 3 years since we've owned it, they give deer tags out for landowners to hunt deer. So we've had family members in hunting deer before we became the deer CWMU, and you'll be in there and you'll shoot at a deer and there will be elk in the canyon. Those elk go 3/4 of the way up the hill and stop again. This country is so steep and rugged and deep. They do not run 5 miles when you bother them. They run up the hill 3/4 of the way and find a new patch of trees and they stop. Okay. And so when we look at this is prime habitat for that northern beaver herd. And hopefully in a minute, Mike, the Wardle, the biologist, you guys can ask him questions, but he's also done surveys of this area and seen how the elk, they calve in here, they summer in here, they rut in here, and they don't leave. Over the last 3 years of just watching these elk, I only know of one bull that's been killed on the public that we've had in here. Because once they come in, they don't leave. Now the snow pushes them out. So as far as cow hunting later in the season and stuff, I know the public can eventually get access to maybe some of the cows in here that get pushed off into the winter range. But when the elk come in here in the summer and in the rut, they sit in here. And so I think that in my briefs that I wrote, when it talks about other factors in habitat and what keeps elk from roaming way out and around, that's one of the things that we have is we are the center of this northern herd. They come into here and this is where all their cover is, their water, their feed, and they stay in here. And then you add the public pressure on top of that, and they basically just hang out in here until the hunts are done. So, I mean, this is the kind of vegetation, forage, bedding areas, steep canyons. So we're sitting kind of on a center point of the ranch, and we're going to make a total circle like this with the pictures. So we can I'll just show you what this looks like and how big and deep these canyons are. So we're kind of making a circle here. You can see the ranch goes clear to the shale rock here. On the right-hand side here, it goes clear out around here. There's big canyons that roll like this. There will be elk in one canyon, and you're in a different canyon hunting. Those elk don't even know you're there. I mean, this country is so big and steep, and the canyons are so deep in here. I mean, you can see the kind of terrain and how steep it is. I mean, this is a big roll-off canyon that'll hold elk, and I mean, it's just there's just place after place after place that hold the elk in this property, and they don't leave. I would argue to say this northeastern herd of the beaver, their home habitat is in this private. Their home habitat is not miles out of here. So this kind of gives you an idea of just some of the canyons and the steep country in there. Now, this picture I wanted to show you guys. So I don't know when it was, but it was what, 8-10 years ago, maybe. There was a giant fire on the Beaver Mountain, and it burnt all of this country. And the reason this is looking west off of the property. The reason I bring this up is this private property is almost like a big island, because we have more of the cover, aspen, pine, water. We're a big spotlight on this end of this mountain, and most of the country's been burned all the way around us. And so the elk, they flood in here and they sit. This is where they summer and they calve. You can't get any higher than this. We sit clear up on the highest shale rock. The property goes clear up into the shale rock on this picture right here. So this is where they come up, they summer, they calve, they stay here, they rut here. This is their habitat. And so this is looking north now. You can see how these canyons drop way off, clear down into the flats. The property goes clear out to where you can see the burns start there. I mean, there is canyon after canyon in this property that hold elk. And you don't drop into this canyon and shoot a bull and all the elk on this property run out. I mean, it just doesn't happen. That's just the quality of this habitat holds these elk through the entire season. So as you turn, I mean, you can see the steep, the thick, the cover. I mean, we have the majority of the cover on this mountain, the bedding areas, the water, sits in this private property. Okay. Now this year there was an 18,000 acre fire that closed all of our roads. If you see that ridge line right there was 18,000 acres that burnt from that ridge line of our property line to the south. So now we have 18,000 acres that sits on that side of us with no vegetation, no trees. I mean, it's just, we seriously are a big beacon that sits on this mountain that these animals flood into and sit. Anyway, so I think that just gives you an idea of what it looks like. I just wanted to show you guys that because I don't think, other than Paula, who came up and saw firsthand, I wasn't able to get anybody else down there due to the fires this year. So anyway, that's just a little bit of the history of the property. I mean, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I know you guys have seen the elk management plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just going to take a minute here and if you look in this elk management plan, it is chock full from beginning to end of all of the reasons why it totally makes sense to partner on this for a CWMU. I mean, they talk about elk habitat being in the high elevations, the aspens, when you have all the water sources. It says right in the studies, elk use of summer range decline markedly beyond 0.5 miles from water. I mean, we have 80% of the water on this end of the mountain. And the elk have been shown not to move more than 0.5 miles from the water sources. I mean, you go through this thing and it's, 10 to 15% of the entire population distribute from public land to private on opening day of rifle. We see that every year. Now, this is the one thing I think is great. It talks about what causes, why do elk, when elk move, why do they move? Where do they move? How far do they move? The studies show that major roads and large ridge lines serve as barriers to movement. We have some of the highest, steepest ridges in this end of the mountain. And our ridges serve as a barrier to these elk. They don't want to run 2 miles up in order to go 2 miles down in order to go. They just move within this private property when they're bothered. They do not run miles away from here. And so that's just kind of the focus I wanted to look at here, is because there is no doubt in my mind, in my 30 years experience managing small CWMUs for elk, this is a rock star piece of property. And just, I think I heard some questions come up in the last meeting when we were talking. I believe, Randy, you had some questions, or maybe it's Gary, I don't know. We have every bit of the public property you can get. That's one of the differences in rural Utah versus, private, sorry, I misspoke. Thanks for catching that. We're different than the northern region and some other regions where it's private ranch and private ranch and private ranch and private ranch, and everybody's touching and this big. You get into rural areas, there isn't all that public ground. We have every bit of, there's 200 acres we don't have. There's one landowner that touches the edge of us that didn't want to be a part of the program. But other than his 200 acres, we have every bit of private you can get. We can't get any more. We've bought every piece of ground around us. Now there is one section, 640 acres, that's owned by Chris Robinson of the Ensign, and he's partnered with us. He said, absolutely, I think this is great. I want to be part with you guys. I know we can be successful. So he put his 640 in. But other than his 640, we've gone through and bought the land from everybody else, because we put this together for the purpose of partnering with the DWR and saving this for habitat. And I'll tell you what, it's been exhausting. I have such a respect for everyone in this room that drives to all these meetings every year. And I was sleeping in my car half the time and driving across the state, and to try and convince others what we see in this. If I didn't realize the pushback we were going to get, we've kind of just been knocked in the dirt every time we try and show people how amazing this partnership could be between the DWR and a private landowner to conserve habitat, build new habitat, manage elk. I don't know what else to do. I've been yelling to the high heavens how amazing this could be kept in habitat for wildlife. And I can tell you that's why we bought it. That's our priority. We don't want to see this turn into a mountain community. If we can't successfully partner with the DWR, I can't say that's not going to happen. When people buy property, that they buy it for a reason. They buy it for investment purposes, to work with the DWR. And I can't see that if plan A doesn't work, I don't know where plan B is going to be. I would hate to see this property end up in 150 cabin lots and lose the ability to have some of the most amazing elk country there is in the southern state. But I would love to have this conversation about the fact that this ranch can be successful. And everywhere in this elk management plan, it talks about partnering with landowners, habitat, partner with landowners. So for us, it's, make private lands provide valuable habitat to elk. Many crucial elk habitats throughout the state are privately owned. We need to promote that. We need to partner. We need to promote. We need to preserve habitat. It's everywhere in here. And so for me, it seems like a no-brainer. I just think with our experience, this could be successful. And it's not just us, the land itself is going to provide the success, but we've just done it for so long with a smaller acreage. It's just comes by second nature for us. And we've been doing it successfully for 30 years. And so I just would love to have a discussion on the land itself and what it can do, and talk to Mike, the biologist, who I know I'm a little bit biased because I want to see this happen, but you know, Mike's been doing studies too on this property, and he has great insight on how it could be successful. And he knows where the elk move on that end of the mountain and where they stay and what's in there. And so just hearing his voice, I think should be a huge weight to this decision. And I'll say one more thing, and then I said I wasn't going to talk very long, and here we are 40 minutes later, 30 minutes later. But in this process, I understand the process. In my brief, I talked about how 2 of the racks voted almost totally for us, and 2 of the racks voted totally against us. And 1 rack from Gary's region was almost split. We had 5 or 6 votes for us and like 8 against. And so they were split. We lost by 2 votes in the central region. Otherwise, we would have been 3-2 in favor of us in the rack. So it was closer to being split than it was everybody against this idea. And I just, anyone that has firsthand knowledge of this ranch, Paul has been up there, the southern rack didn't even blink an eye. The southern rack knows this property. That should mean something. There should be some weight with the region this sits in, that the southern rack was like, absolutely, we have no doubt this could be successful as a CWMU. They weren't unanimous and they voted it in. Every time I go before them, yep, absolutely, we know it. That should mean something. The weight of the southern rack, the biologist that knows the property, those should be big pieces of this. And so I just ask that maybe you guys take that into account, that the people that have firsthand knowledge of this property haven't blinked an eye with how successful this property could be as an elk CWMU. And so anyway, I'll kind of end there. I don't want to just ramble on, and then we can go to the state and then have any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions and go over any of this. So
I appreciate that, Mr. Lieberman. It's Mike, isn't it? Mike.
yep.
I got a couple of questions. First one, you brought up as far as landowners goes, that
Yeah.
Chris is part of it.
Yes.
And then I've actually got on an app that shows land ownership and kind of looked at it myself. It shows, is it Tusher Gold?
Tusher Mountain Gold is
Tusher Mountain Gold.
the company that bought it. Yes, because there's multiple partners.
The
Yeah.
partners that, other than those 2, is there any other landowners in
Tusher Mountain, or
No,
as far as the
part of the
partner?
CWMU?
That's it.
Okay,
That's it. So
those
there's
2 landowners.
yeah, there's Chris Robinson, and then there's the Tusher Mountain business that's owned by a couple people. So it's those 2 landowners that came together. And then there's one other landowner that has, like I said, that has 200 acres on the southeast corner. And he was in to begin with. And so we got everything ready. And then at the last minute, he was out. And so we said, okay, we can't force you to be in the program. So his 200 acres are not in anymore. And so if you look at the map now online, it shows the dots on the CWMU, how they have it, and his property does not have dots on it. So he's out. His 200 acres are out. So they're the only acreage that we don't have that we possibly could get if we could ever convince him to be a part of it. But
What's his name?
I always forget his name. Who did we just talk to about that? Jim Levitt.
Okay.
Jim Levitt, and he's
Okay.
he's has a cabin up there and has had that 200 acres up there for a lot of years, 20, 30 years, maybe or more. And he just was nervous. He said, does this mean that there's just going to be hunters showing up on my porch in my cabin? And I tried to say, no, that's not how it works. It's just that they would be able to hunt on your 200 acres. And then we partnered together on all the hunting. And so he just got nervous with the public. He has a cabin there and he got nervous that the public would be kind of around his stuff. And so at the last minute, he said, I'm going to hold off. I think his wife was having some medical issues and he's just like, this is too much. So he held off for now. It doesn't mean he might not come back in once we kind of get up and moving, if we can add him and he can see that it's not scary to have the public but he's never been involved in this program like we have. So we know how awesome it is to invite hunters in and be working with people and providing amazing hunts for families. And he just doesn't see that because he hasn't been involved in it. So, but he's the only one.
Okay, that sounds good. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Another question is, you brought up your other CWMU, old
Uh-huh.
woman. That's got quite a bit public land in it, if I'm
It
not
does.
mistaken.
We've been one of the public land discussions. Yes.
It's got quite a bit. Now,
Yeah.
does this one have any public land in it?
It has like 126 acres in the middle of it. And I have a map here actually. And I think maybe Mike might have a map, but just so the board's aware, we're actually in the process right now with the Forest Service of doing a land exchange, because we have one island that sits just like not even a quarter of a mile. There's one piece of property that sits right off of the main property. And we're actually in the process of doing a land exchange where we're going to exchange that one piece of island for all of the little piece. I think the Forest Service has like 120 something acres inside, but it's broken up between 60 acres here and 3 acres here and 7 acres. They're little pieces that sit all over in the private. And so we're actually exchanging the land inside for a piece of ours that sits on the outside. And so we're within a year or two, I don't know, depending on how fast that moves, who knows? They have to send it back to Washington and then they look at it and they send it back. But we're removing that problem of the little pieces of public that sit inside. There's not much. They're totally isolated and they're just little teeny slivers.
So it's actually part of the trade piece would be part of your existing CWMU.
We're creating land for land. Yes.
Land for land, and it's on the exterior, that outer boundary of what you have
Yes.
now. Is it one of the contiguous pieces or non-contiguous
It's the one,
pieces?
there's the one piece that's, let's see, I have a map here. Let me see if I can get to my map. And then so here is a map. If it'll load. We'll wait for a minute. So, okay. So I'll stand it. Can I move away from the mic? Is that okay? This piece right here sits off. This piece is almost exactly to the acre, the number of acres of these little islands. And so we're trading them that piece for these islands in here to eliminate, so that they can have this isolated piece. They really want that. And that eliminates any problems with land.
You're gonna have to take the mic.
Oh, okay.
People who are
Okay, sorry. Do you want me to go through that again? But you understand?
Yeah, probably should, just for
Okay.
folks online.
Okay, so the island right here, we call this the Silver Queen. This is a piece. This piece of ground that sits on the east side, kind of southeast corner. This will be traded to the Forest Service, and then the Forest Service will give us these little islands that sit inside. So there will be no internal pieces of public ground anymore. And then they'll get that piece. So there's no issue there. Levitt's piece sits right here. And so when we originally did the CWMU, Levitt's piece was in it. He was thinking about doing it. So we own this piece too. It connected to Levitt's. So when Levitt left, it left this kind of sitting by itself too. So we've actually talked to him about trading this. This might be in part of it as well. And what they're going to do is they're actually going to draw a straight line like this so that the boundaries are straight. So we're going to be trading him this land, and in return, we're going to draw a straight line here and a straight line there, and then do all the so we're going to make it a square so that there's not any jagged lines on the edge. There's not going to be no internal public. It's just going to be, they're going to draw a square here and there like that. And so that will square everything up. There won't be any public issues there. And so that process we're actually going to be turning in. We've been working on that for almost a year now, and we're going to be turning in that application in the next few months. So,
Council, my name's Gary White.
Hi.
I've been asked to represent the Wildlife Board today.
Hi.
I just need to disclose that I know Jim Levitt.
Okay.
I'm friends with one of his sons.
Okay.
I didn't realize this until you mentioned his name, but
Okay.
I've actually been to that property.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll affect anything that we're doing here today, but I needed to disclose that.
Okay. I appreciate that. And Jim is actually friends with one of the owners of Tusher Mountain Gold. And so Jim had been talking to Troy, who's one of the owners of Tusher Mountain Gold, at the beginning, and Jim was entertaining the idea of being in it. And then at the end, he said, for now, let's not. And so we respected that. We didn't add his in. And
I just want to make sure the parties
Okay.
are comfortable with having me continue.
I'm fine.
That's fine.
I'm
Okay.
just fine with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's.
Other questions for Mike?
Yeah, I had one. The land you're talking about trading out, you're gonna relinquish all claim on that within the CWMU itself. You're not gonna be trying to add acreage or do anything like that. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes. So we are not, the land that we're trading out that's on the outside edge, that is not, we will have no claim. That will be 100% forest land. We will have no claim to that land whatsoever. And then they're going to trade us for the interior islands. And then that will become the deeded property inside. So we will not keep any claim to the land that we're trading them. Was that what your question was, Kent?
Yeah, that was my question. I was just making certain I understood that correctly, that, you weren't, that this was not just strictly a land ownership and straightening up boundaries thing, but it is actually part of the CWMU as well.
Yes. And just for full disclosure, we actually have some land in a different part of the Fish Lake National Forest that they want to trade us. So this CWMU will actually be getting bigger. Now, by how many acres, I don't know. But when I said we were going to draw squares, lines like that, I mean, you're talking about the possibility of between 600 to 1,000 more acres above what we are now. And so we have some land in other parts of the Fish Lake National Forest that the Forest Service wants. And so they're actually we're in the process of, we're going to be actually trading them. To make those squares, we have to be able to trade value for value. And so they're actually going to be trading us some other land, not involved with anything. We just have some other forest land that they want that's an island. And so this CWMU will actually be growing by anywhere from 600 to 1,000 acres when we're done trading them. But it could take a year to 2 years by the time they approve these aren't fast moving things, but that's what we've been working on. So that is coming down the pike, I guess. So, but so yes, Kent, we won't have any ownership in the land we trade them. It will just be an acreage for acreage swap on that piece that's right next to the CWMU. So,
Can I ask a clarifying question?
yeah.
So I've only ever seen that map that you had up previously. Was that with Mr. Levitt's property included?
That's
South-
just
on
the
the southeast
private. That's not the CWMU map. That's just the BLM land ownership map. So
Right.
that shows all the private land up there.
Right.
I can put it back up.
So I guess my question is how many, as it is today, how many acres of contiguous private land do you have?
As today, well, we have to take out so let me take the mic with me. So the contiguous land basically cuts off right here. Levitt's is this piece right here.
Okay.
So the contiguous land is this. If I was to draw a circle, it's that, like that, down to here. And then we have these two islands that sit here. And this was going to be contiguous. And then when Jim said he didn't want to be in, it basically made this an island because Jim's piece, it acts as a barrier right here. But as far as contiguous acres in that property, I'd have to pull it back up, but I want to say it was in the 5,600 without those pieces. And then when we trade those back to the Forest Service, they're going to give us acreage for those. So we'll bump it back up to that 5,800 acres. It'll bump the acreage back up because they're going to just trade us acre for acre for stuff that's contiguous.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mike?
I have one. A lot of times, like when we arrange these partnerships, it's to mitigate damage from wildlife that winter, summer, spend time there. Is agriculture using this area at all?
Cattle, and that's Chris. Chris runs his cows in there. Chris has the grazing permit. So there's cattle in there, but that's the only agricultural use is for Chris for grazing. Now, our purpose for doing it is because we're going to improve the habitat. We're actually going to go in there and we're going to log and burn and reseed and spread water even more. So we're going to take, and the reason I say that is because that's what we did on the Old Woman Plateau when we bought it. We took ground that wasn't being used really by animals, and we spent years and years and years improving the habitat with partnerships. So our purpose was to be improving the habitat. I know there's also the loss aspect of it, damage from the wildlife, and that's Chris has the cattle operation in there. So he's more interested in partnerships and improving habitat to co-partner with the cattle operation. So
How many animals does he run? Are you
I
aware?
don't know that I couldn't answer that. I maybe should have called him and found out beforehand. I'm not 100% sure because he runs cows on our mountain and he also runs cows over by Ensign on the Pavant range. And so I'm not 100% sure how many he runs up there. So.
All right.
Paula?
I have a just quick question on the, so the cow hunting. You said
Yes.
like creative ideas there. What's your plan to harvest the cows
Yeah.
that are necessary for
Well,
elk?
I appreciate that. So we're just going to hunt them early. I know that a majority, so just the way elk are, I'm in a room full of people that know elk in this state better than I do. So it's when I say things, I feel like I'm a little bit on the lower end of the elk population's knowledge on the state. But I know a lot of cow hunting happens later. A lot of people hunt cows in November, December, January, and some of that's because the elk, they get to where they can be hunted later. And so we don't have that luxury because the later hunts here, the cows come out of their summer rut range and they head down into winter range, which would leave the property. And so talking with Mike, we're going to hunt them in August. We're going to hunt them early. And we're going to hunt them. And even if we have to hunt some in September, the reason we're going to do that, and we've talked about primitive weapon hunts, archery hunting cows versus rifle. Mike and I have talked about different ways to get the cow harvest that's needed. We totally understand that if we're not getting the cow harvest, we're not doing our part in management, right? So it's crucial that we get cow harvest because that's the point. That's elk management. So we know that we're not going to go in, and if we go in and have 0% cow harvest, we don't expect to be a elk CWMU for very long. So we understand that we have to harvest cows. And this comes back to my discussions I've had with the Old Woman. We hunt bulls. We'll kill probably 4 to 5 bulls a year in that 2,000 acre piece. 2,000 acres, and we're killing 4 to 5 bulls a year. And it's their winter range. They come down into there. We've improved the habitat tremendously, and we kill the bulls in there, and next year they're there. And the next year they're there, and they never quit coming. And so that's the same as here. If cows are going up in here and this is where they summer and they calve and they rut, they'll be back. They'll keep coming and they'll keep coming. So we can go in August and harvest whatever 3 cows for whatever is required of us as we go. And those elk will be back. If that's where they calve and that's where they harvest, that's where they rut and summer, and we're improving the habitat so that they want to be there even more. We're just going to hunt them early. You have to hunt them when they're there, so that's our plan. Cause I believe right now you can hunt cows from August 1st, I believe August 1st through January 31st. And so that August 1st date gives us tons of flexibility to go in there early in August and harvest our cow number, get the cow numbers. So
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? No, Kyle, we'll turn some time to you.
I'm going to just ask one more question just for Mike and the board for clarification. It seems we have some question or confusion through the original rack and board process and through the application. Were the non-contiguous lands part of that conversation, or this has always been about the main section of contiguous land? They're kind of
Yeah.
central.
So the one piece that's connected to Levitt's, when we originally gave the map and the discussions and wrote the application, whatever, that piece was part of everything. I think what happened is as we went through the process, the discussion became so much on can we harvest elk there or not, that the map never got changed to show that piece was no longer, that there was two non-contiguous pieces, right? So as of right now, the discussion is on the main piece.
Okay.
Now, and my knowledge of the area, and maybe Mike will be able to also talk about this, the 90% of the elk use that main piece. Those two pieces that sit over there are not main habitat areas for elk. And now there's no trees on them. They've burnt totally to black, both those pieces that sit over there. So that's one of the other reasons we're doing the application to trade, is because we're taking those two pieces and we're going to put them as contiguous acres to benefit the
Okay. So yeah, so hypothetically, if this was approved, I mean, minus the fact that they've been burned, there wouldn't be hunting on the non-contiguous acres. This has all been about
it's been about the main contiguous piece. Now, with Levitt's and that other piece, there are animals that move through there.
Sure.
But with Levitt removing himself for now out of there, it took the one piece that was touching Levitt's. There would have been some hunting in there, I would assume, because I think Levitt's has some deer, because we're a deer CWMU already.
Right.
And so there's deer that move in there. There's elk that move through there. They're all over in these canyons. But so yes, now the discussion is from the contiguous piece from Levitt's and out around.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Kyle?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, we'll just turn the time to you to see if there's some things you want to inform us.
Sure. Yeah, I think, my presentation today, I think, is going to be, one, addressing the division's concerns, and two, trying to guide what I view as the considerations that kind of go into this process. So, start broad scope here. Title 23, requires the Wildlife Board to preserve, protect, conserve, perpetuate, introduce, and manage wildlife. Some of those considerations are listed out in statute, specifically the balance of habitat requirements and wildlife with social and economic activities, and to maintain wildlife on a sustainable basis. And those are the considerations that go into all of the programs that the Wildlife Board and Division of Wildlife oversee. And so those are kind of the overarching considerations when you look at this in statute. And then in a rule, the considerations for CWMUs are income to landowners, create satisfying hunting opportunities, increasing wildlife resources, adequate protection for landowners who open their lands for hunting, provide access to public and private lands for hunting. And then one additional consideration is providing landowners an incentive to manage lands to protect and sustain wildlife habitat. And that is, that specifically is one thing that Mr. Labram has talked a lot about today, is the goal is to invest more money into this habitat. So, for the purposes of today, and we're looking at the old rule, not the rule that was passed in June. The division's concerns have been, and I think continue to be, is more on a biological basis and animal behavior basis. And I have Chad here and Mike World's in the audience and Kobe Jones, and I defer to them a lot on the biology. But the consideration is whether 10,000 acre minimum is what we consider the home range, and what we've established as the rule for this whole program. What we look at is, hey, we need 10,000 acres to really hold and benefit elk. We do allow variances. It is, based on what the habitat's going to hold. And over the past few years, we've really tried to walk away from really small CWMUs and the concerns about their ability to meet those program goals. With the Kimberly CWMU, which is about 5,300 acres of private land, got the public land in there in the middle of it today. And the concern is, right now, the elk come off public land onto the private land away from the current hunts. Once we introduce hunting onto the CWMU, is that CWMU going to struggle down the road? Where are we going to be at in 3 or 4 years for hunt quality and holding those elk and providing good habitat? It's currently great habitat. There's no question. And then, but what is it going to do benefiting that wildlife down the road? And as far as what helps the private landowners here, there's programs for every type of landowner in the state. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the CWMU program. Mr. Labrum mentioned quickly that they currently get private land permits. And that's something that this board passed a while ago, is that there's a special drawing for private landowners to hunt their own land. And that helps us as the division manage that herd. So if they're sitting there and that's their home range and they generally stay there, there is a concern about how we manage and keep that population healthy. Those are the tools that we're using. I think to frame this, the consideration we're talking about is the hunting opportunity and access to public. So, I think it was in Mr. Labum's reply, we can talk about trespass fees and allowing the public to go on his property. That does have a price threshold. The CWMU program does allocate probably 1 permit for the public. So down the road, is there going to be a benefit for both the private vouchers they issue and the 1 public permit to harvest enough bulls and cows to really be a successful program? Or are we going to look at this down the road on renewal and be like, this hasn't really been working? So that kind of dovetails in my mind to these policy considerations. And this is where I'll use the word precedent. We've been talking a lot about precedent. Really what I'm talking about is not a courtroom precedent, but the policy precedent that we look at here and the pressure that the Wildlife Board and the division is put under from all sorts of parties throughout the state, and how we have to maintain a program. So when you're considering these, we have to apply them to everyone in the state. That's why it's really hard to have bright line rules. All habitat's different. We've done studies that look at, and we estimate that 10,000 acres generally in the state of Utah is what's beneficial for holding elk. Are there places that require more? Are there places that require yes? Yeah, that's fair. But how do you manage a program consistently, and you consider factors so that you can look the next applicant in the face and the past applicants in the face and explain why one applicant deserves to be part of the CWMU program and why another one doesn't? And I think that would be my biggest request for the board today, is when you're looking at this, make sure you couch your considerations and why this property should be successful and how it's different from other people. We've had a lot of variance requests in the past. I'm sure we're going to have more variance requests in the future. How do we make sure that this decision is not arbitrary? The biggest change between November and now is just the rule. And it's true, looking at the rule, we can look at the next applicant and say, you don't meet the 9,000 minimum threshold for a variance. But how do we make sure that that decision's couched in science and it's not just arbitrary? How do we avoid the scrutiny of saying, well, you've allowed this in the past, you've been flexible, why does the rule even exist? And I think that's going to be the hard part with maintaining a program, is what is the line that we're drawing to keep a successful program and be consistent to the public. And that's, quite frankly, I think that's, in my mind, the big discussions is, we look a lot at the habitat. I want to defer to Chad and I'd love to hear from Mike about what the property looks like and how successful it would be tomorrow, how successful it would be in 4 years. And, whether this does meet the goals of the program. And, upon deliberation, I, encourage you to look at that. Is it justified? And can you stick with, that justification in light of other applicants? And, about uphold the integrity of the decision that you make.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Chad, have you got anything to add there?
Yeah, but I have a few thoughts. I came here today thinking that I was going to talk a lot about, like Kyle said, biology and stuff, but some additional concerns are more pressing to me now than even the biological things. And that was a process of how this was approved in the first place. Until this morning, I didn't know a lot of these things. I didn't know that there was public land in the Kimberly CWMU. That didn't go through the RAC and the board process. When Kimberly was approved, it wasn't approved with public land. Our application said 0 acres. I didn't know that it had non-contiguous pieces. I thought that this was a one contiguous piece. The 50 on here, it says 5614 acres of contiguous land. When we subtract that non-contiguous and the public land, we're down to 5,100 acre CWMU. My mind goes back to if this was presented in this direction when it was approved to be a new CWMU, would it have passed? Would the fact that we're including public land, so, and this is, public land is a big one for me. Like that, I've been hammered. I've been the coordinator for 5 years, and I've been hammered on it at pretty much, it feels like at least every RAC tour, maybe not every single RAC meeting. So to put public land in a CWMU without disclosing it is a huge deal for me. Like I sit here before you right now thinking I've just lost a whole bunch of credibility because there's public land in a CWMU that wasn't heard by the CWMU advisory committee. It wasn't approved by the RAC and it wasn't approved by the board, but yet it's in there. I would say the same for non-contiguous land. We've had it since I've been the coordinator. Those go through the CWMU advisory committee. They get approved by the CWMU advisory committee, and then a recommendation comes forth and it's disclosed, and it's part of the discussion in the RAC and the board that this one would be including non-contiguous. Now we just changed that rule where it's a line, right, that we can see whether it's, well, if it fits the rule, then it's going to be in, and if it doesn't, it's not now. But up to that date, the way that we'd do it, the way, at least specifically me, is that would be heard and it would be disclosed in those meetings. So just as we're here today, there's a lot of confusion. I've also been through a lot of things where worked with federal partners. Sometimes the federal government doesn't move super fast. And when we talk about, well, we're going to trade this and trade that, until it happens, it's not. And so I do actually have concerns about that too. It could be in the works. I've heard of other trade lands trying to trade with the public, and it can take years. Like we don't know when that will happen. So actually, as of now, that's what I'd say. My biggest concern going forward with this is, if I had my druthers, we'd go back and we'd discuss the public land being in the CWMU. We'd discuss whether it should be non-contiguous under the old rule, more so than what we'd be discussing if it should be an under acreage elk CWMU. To Kyle's point too, like the biological thing, I do have concerns. A lot of times when we ask CWMUs to harvest specifically cows, I think that this would be fine for bulls. But if we need a big harvest on cows, that's when we get pushback from CWMUs. That's when the potential to push animals off of the CWMU happens. Like if we got really over objective on the beaver and said, hey, Mike, we need you to kill 50 cows. That's a lot different than 5 or 10, right? And it's hard to project in the future. Are we going to ever have to ask that? I don't know. But if we did, is there going to be pushback? I know that's part of our issue on some of these over objective units is they want the elk on their property, and if they hunt hard, there's a potential for them to leave. So, and I would say that, you know, we met as a CWMU advisory rule committee to discuss this. This was a topic of discussion. It's something that's come up quite a bit. And I thought through that discussion that we landed at a pretty good place at the, you know, you got to be to 90% of that acreage. Though I think that covers mostly my thoughts.
Chad, I apologize for my ignorance, but help me understand when we fill out an application for CWMU, is the applicant required to put down how many public acres are in there?
Yeah, that's where it starts is it's all electronic, and on there it says private acres and a place for public acres. I'm not going to throw this all on Mike because we own part of it too. Like we have a lot of reviews through our system and we missed it. We missed it on maps and we should have caught that, but it does start with the applicant putting in what they're applying for.
And it says 0 acres or no acres or
It says 0 public acres.
0 public acres?
Can I make a comment on that real quick?
Please
Are you
do.
okay? When we turned in the map, we turned in our map. It's the regular BLM forest map. It shows the private, it shows the forest islands in there. And if I remember right, I didn't realize, you know, first of all, there was no attempt at hiding anything. I don't know, Chad made it seem like we were trying to hide something through and we did something deceitful. We didn't try and hide anything. If I remember right, when we went back and did our maps, when we filled out the application, we counted our private acreage. And I'll have to go back because I actually went to a gentleman that worked for the Forest Service forever that has mapping programs and everything, so you can map your acreage and everything like that. I went to him with so we could get our acreage right and stuff. And I'm almost 100% sure we didn't even include the islands. That when it asked for our private land, now when it says, do you have private land inside there? I guess if nothing was put down, then maybe nothing was put down. But I'm almost 100% sure we didn't include the 120 acres of little slivers that are in our total acreage. So that in our application, the 5,700 or 5,800, I'm almost 100% certain we didn't include the 120 acres of private or public slivers that were in there under our private acreage. Now, if we I know it says private acreage and then it says public underneath it, if I remember right in the application, if we didn't put those 120 acres in the public box, we might have not put it in there, but we didn't include it in our private. We didn't include that we weren't trying to suck in that private or the public ground and add it to our private line. That was not something we did. But if we didn't put and maybe in our mind, we're thinking that isn't going to be included in our acreage. So we didn't write it on that line. But I was going to say, I think I'd have to go back and look, but I have all the maps that we did. And we weren't trying to sneak 120 acres of public land into our acreage requirement that wasn't, I mean, we just wouldn't have done that. There's no reason to do that.
I don't think that's quite as big a deal as
Yeah.
putting 0 down there on the public, because
Yeah.
that is the flag for the advisory committee to look and see if we want to renew that going forward and stuff. And
Yeah.
that, with that 0 in there, that wouldn't get caught. And that is the one
Yeah.
for, if you have acreage in there, then you give up additional tags to the public for, and if it's a 0 in there, then
Oh, for
year
sure.
over year over year, it just compounds and
For
it
sure.
actually gets worse. And I think that, to me, that's kind of
Yeah.
not a good thing. But,
Yeah. Oh, I understand. I mean, like I said, the Old Woman Plateau has 1,200 acres of public, and we give an extra tag to the public because of that. That's what we have agreements. We're not. And so I don't know. I feel bad. I feel like we weren't trying to be slippery. We weren't trying. I mean, this was not something we were trying to sneak through the process. I hope Chad doesn't think I think we put down what our private land was. And I guess I'm not sure I even filled out the application, to be honest. There was a partnership, but I know that when we calculated our land that we were going to actually hunt, that was the private land, That acreage does not include the,
Yeah, probably, it
Yeah.
sounds like it includes the non-contiguous land also in your application, which is not supposed to be that way either.
that did, and that changed at the last minute. That changed at the last minute. And so when we went to the advisory board and that, I mean, you're talking about a years long process. And so the non-contiguous acres and you know, like they said, Chad, obviously the rule is different now. I mean, if you have acreage within 3 miles or 4 miles of your CWMU, you get to count it. So the rule now is different, but back then,
Well,
the
Not,
rule-
not,
the
count, you don't get accounted for your.
acreage,
for
but you can hunt
acreage
it.
permit,
Yes,
but you get a
yes,
hunt it.
You get to hunt it. Now we're under the old rule, so I'm not trying to suck in the new rule with the old rule. I'm not trying to do that, but I can guarantee you there was no deceit in any of this. I mean, the elk are on, whether it's 5,300 acres or 5,780, those elk are all over that land and they stay there. And I mean, if we have to change from, because of the non-contiguous, from 5,780 down to 5,300, it doesn't change 1 minute of the success that this ranch, I mean, it doesn't change the hunting. The elk are on that 5,300 acres. They don't leave. And so there was no fishy stuff going on. I don't.
And I guess I brought that up because I
Yeah.
thought you said when they asked, is there public land, that you said yes
There's public land
in the
inside it.
CWMU. So
Yes.
I thought your response was they asked, is there public land in your seat in the CWMU? And you said yes. So
It's
from there, I
inside the
thought you
prop-
had
okay.
knowledge that there was,
Yeah.
that you added it in. So
No, it's inside the private boundary. That's what I thought the question was. There is those little islands there's 120 acres of total of little slivers that are inside our private ground. But we didn't include that acreage in our calculation of the private land. We didn't include public lands in our private calculation. So maybe I misunderstood the question, but when you asked if there was private land in there, there is it is in the inside the private.
Inside the CWMU contiguous portion.
Yes, it's inside our contiguous portion, but we didn't use that to calculate our private acreage. So maybe I misunderstood when you asked me the question before. I didn't. So that our acreage calculation does not include the public land.
Yeah, I think you answered it the way I
Okay.
meant. I asked the
Okay.
question.
I got a question. Does that public have access to the 126 acres?
There's one piece that a road goes, there's like one piece that's 60 acres that a road goes through the corner of, and they have access to that. But there's other islands that there's no roads into. I can explain where these slivers come from. This is an old mining district where they do like 20-acre mining claims. And so you look at the map and there's like mining claims that do this, and so there's like a little sliver of 1 acre that sits between 2 mining claims in a triangle, and it's out in the middle of the forest and there's no roads to it. And so there is one, I don't have the map up, but there is one like 60-acre piece that one of the roads goes through the corner of. And that piece they have access to. I mean, they can pull up to where the road goes through and they can walk into the 60 acres. And so there is one piece that does have a road through it, but the other 100 or the other 60 acres are just little slivers that sit out with no roads or trails or anything that even access them. So.
And then just being a landowner, how much land do you have? I've heard 56, 53, 51.
Yeah.
6. I mean,
The total.
how much ground are you
Yes,
paying taxes on?
The total ground is like 5735. I'd have to pull up my map.
Continuous acres.
Oh,
deeded.
contiguous acres
Deeded.
is the 5,300, just over 5,300 contiguous.
Chad, where are we coming up with 51? Just curious.
sorry. So the application that was turned in says that there's the total of 5,614 private acres. This is going to be a little bit rough because I just did this, but those non-contiguous pieces were about 360 acres. So that would take that contiguous down to 52, 54. Where it went down to 5,100 is if the 160 acres ish of of Forest Service was included or not. So it could be the 52, 54-ish contiguous, or if the Forest Service was counted as part of that, it would take it down to the 5,100. So
And it was
on
not.
this application,
Yeah, it was not included.
on this application, I have that Michael Abrams signed 4,974 acres in, and Chris Robinson 640.
So yes, the forest was not included in that. So it would be that 52, whatever the 50 without the 2 islands.
Your deeded acres though, without.
Oh, without Chris's?
Yeah, we're 4700.
Yes, the 47. Yep. And then we added Chris's 640. He has the 1 square mile, the 640 acres. Sorry, I didn't know. I thought you meant total deeded, but yeah, ours is not Chris's.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is back to the grazing stuff. So the guy that actually runs cows on there, he buys grazing rights from you guys, or does he run his cows on the forest surrounding it and that's just dribble over?
No, so
Because it's not fenced or anything.
no,
right?
no. To do the short version of this, there was a huge legal fight between Chris's group and the previous owners of this property over ownership and contracts and who and whether there was a promise for Chris's group to buy. I mean, it was a big lawsuit. So and this is before we ever came on board. This was previous owners. And so what was decided by I can't remember if it was the appellate court or the Supreme Court in Utah, was that the deeded property, mineral rights, use of the land, building, whatever you do, belong to this ownership group, and the grazing rights belong to Chris's group. So Chris has grazing rights for well, I think he has permits on the forest too, but the private property, Chris's group has the grazing rights on the private. And then we own all mineral rights and surface uses and building and everything else that happens on the land. And so that's how that got split up. And that's why he has the grazing there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike or Kyle? Is there anything else either one of you would like us to hear before we adjourn to go deliberate?
I actually, if I got to call him up, I'm calling him up. I'd like Mike to come up.
Okay,
I'd like the
Mike Wardell,
biologist.
come up and give us your 2 cents and let us know what you think.
And then, yeah, after Mike, then
I was thinking maybe I'd get away without having to speak.
Go ahead, state your name just for the record.
I'm Mike Wardle. I'm the district wildlife biologist that covers the beaver unit. So I'll just speak to the biological side of things with the property. I think Mr. Labram's represented it pretty accurately. There are elk there. I do a preseason classification between July and August each year from the ground. And I'll typically count anywhere from 50 to 150 cows on or adjacent to that property. On survey flights, typically when we do our elk survey flights, those are in the wintertime. So the elk aren't on the property during then. But when we do mountain goat flights, that's sometimes in the fall. And last year when we flew over that country, we saw over 200 elk on the property in October from the helicopter. It does consistently hold elk. It's great habitat. I think that just from the local perspective, having a large landowner on the beaver is helpful. The concerns have been talked about, with cow hunting. I do think Mr. Labrum's willing to try some new things, but that is a concern of hunting those cows hard and how they respond to that in the future. So yeah, any other questions for me?
I guess I got a question. I don't know if you can answer it or not, but where it sounds like there's not a ton of fences. Is there opportunity for the public / private hunter or landowner hunter to hunt on the wrong area because of the boundary issue?
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's a concern for our law enforcement folks that they've expressed. It's just that the boundary is not clearly defined. It is, as you saw on the map, it's a very jagged property. If that was to change with the Forest Service in the future, that could help. But currently, as it sits, it is a pretty tough boundary to enforce.
Okay, I know that was one of the things that, as far as the CWMUs, that's one of the legislative things that they said was they're going to do boundaries one way or the other depending on that. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
I got, what is the hunt strategy on the properties, the Forest Service property surrounding this CWMU? Is it open bull or limited entry? Or?
It's a limited entry elk unit. So during the summertime, a lot of the heavy hunting pressure comes from during the fall, a lot of the heavy hunting pressure comes from spike hunters, and then the big bull hunters, obviously. But as far as a lot of people being out there pressuring elk to push them on or off the property, a lot of that's from the spike hunt.
I got a question. This might, Mike, you can answer it, but this might be Chad too in the division. But what are some other options besides the CWMU for a parcel like this? I know was said at the RACs and the Wildlife Board, but I think it's important we bring that up because there's a couple other options, correct?
Yeah, and I guess the first one would be, I think you participated this year, is that there's a public land or a private landowner draw. So your odds are really good that way. You can draw that permit and hunt. It's a voucher that you can't make any money off of it, but you can get a tag that you can hunt. For cows, there's a potential to get mitigation permits that you can get some cow elk hunts. You always have the option of selling trespass fees if you got some good elk on you and are looking to make some money.
And the reason why that new option, the draw with the good access, can you explain?
Yeah, I think it's to help those that are not of the acreage to be CWMUs or participate in other programs, that it gives them the ability for people with less acreage that have elk on them to benefit from the elk. Be able to hunt their own land in a limited entry unit.
Any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
I'll just finish with something and just kind of answer. They did start a program. Let me just say this. I would love to have an elk tag on the beaver every year of my life as a hunter. Okay. Or every year. Yes. As a hunter, I'd love to go on that property and kill a 390 bull every year of my life. That would be a dream. That's not what we're doing here. We want to take this property and put the resources into it that we did on the Old Woman. Those kind of resources to improve habitat and take some of these big pine filled canyons and timber them out and reseed and put water in there. And that doesn't happen with our one private landowner tag we get that aren't guaranteed even on a yearly basis. We might get it every other year, every 3. We don't know. You can't sell it. We can't generate income to put into the habitat projects we want to do. That's just kind of like, hey, some of these small landowners are mad because they want to hunt their own property. Would I turn down hunting my own property? No, that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to turn a big piece of mountain property into an amazing piece of habitat and partnership with the DWR. That's the benefit of the CWMU program, is that it says, okay, we're going to partner with you. We're going to let the public come in and hunt a hunt. Then we're going to give you 2 tags, whatever it is, 3. And then you can use the income from the tags you get to do your habitat projects, to put the water lines here, to timber this and to cut the timber out of this canyon and put feed in there and to burn this off. And that's what we're doing here. That's what that's what we're trying to do. So, I mean, it's not that the private land draw isn't exciting. It's exciting for our family that we can get a tag and we can't do sell it to generate funds to help with our projects, but we can hunt in there. And as far as like LOA, we've tried the LOA. There's not enough private landowners on the Beaver to get enough private land to make an LOA, because you have to have certain percentages of land on the whole unit to be an LOA, and there's not enough people to do that. And so LOA is out. We can't do that. And so I just wanted to answer. I mean, I don't mind the new program. It's fun, but I guess my last comment is I would hate to see that going from 5,600 acres to 53 or 5,250, those 300 acres are going to make zero difference on how successful we are in this hunt. This property is just amazing for a CWMU, and those 300 acres are not going to make or break this property. So if it's 5,250, I mean, I mean, to have Mike sit up here and say that he sees the elk and thinks that we could successfully harvest elk in there, I mean, that's a big deal. His opinion shouldn't matter. I mean, that's his job, is to make these positions on successful hunting. And so, and I guess the last thing that the cow hunting's been brought up is the one issue Mike has. We can kill cows in there and they'll keep coming back. We have proven that for 30 years on the Old Woman. We've killed bulls and cows in their winter ground. In 2,000 acres of winter ground, we kill bulls and cows every year, and they don't stop coming back. This fear that if we hunt for 2 years, the elk are going to leave, that's to me is foreign, because we hunt a 2,000 acre piece of property on the Old Woman every year, and we kill 2 to 3 bulls and cows, and they keep coming back every single year because the habitat's been improved and that's where they want to be, and they keep coming back. So I just don't see this fear that the elk are not going to come back if we kill some of them. I just don't see the reality in that. So this is our only option, to partner with the DWR and improve habitat and have the funds to do it. And I mean, our money goes back into the property. We're not trying to make this a CWMU so that we can retire from our jobs. This is not going to be a windfall for us. This money goes back into the property. And so that's why we're here. We're trying to take advantage of a program that's been set up to do everything in the elk management plan that's laid out. And so there just isn't another program that helps us do that. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on LOAs. You can be part of an LOA, so it doesn't matter how much private land is in a unit. You just need to have 50% or more than 50% of the private lands in habitat. So as long as you have those acreages and get enough private landowners. Now maybe the other private landowners don't want to. That's what I understand is they want. But just to clarify, that there's not a certain amount of private land you have to have in the unit. And then I'll just go back to, we talked about public land. I just pulled up our hunt planner map. It's a pretty big block. It's not excluding the public land on here. So if the public lands, so I just ask you to submit a new map as soon as we can that excludes that public land if it's not supposed to be in there.
We did not put that in there. We submitted a map and it had the public land on our map, like just a forest map that showed it. We did not include that.
Okay.
We didn't draw those boundaries.
So that's one of the other things is now with the new rule too,
Yeah.
going into effect, we want a digital map
Yeah.
that comes from you guys, because there's a lot of times the mapping stuff comes back on the division of like,
Yeah.
oh, this wasn't my map. Well,
Yeah.
going forward, and just so everybody knows,
Yeah.
we're going to be using the file that the landowner gives
Yeah.
us, and it won't be a division map or a division error. If there's an error,
Yeah.
it's on the CWMU.
Yeah. I'd be happy to do that because we're not even going to, we don't care to even hunt the 120 acres that sit in there. I mean, so if, like I said, we didn't include that in the map if it got included. So I would be happy to give you a digital file where it goes around those little pieces. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that
Yeah.
as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Mr. Labram,
Oh,
have you had pretty good success
Okay.
trading lands with the Forest Service in the past?
We traded lands over on the Old Woman. There's been 2 different times we've done trade lands with them. I can tell you right now, I've been in every trade land meeting over the last 8 months with the Forest Service on this property. It's already, now I can't answer for Washington, right? You fill out the application, you send it back to Washington, DC, they review it, then they send it back. But the guys in Richfield, Utah that do this for a living, that's their job, is the trade lands kind of thing. We've already got an approval to trade the islands for the interior. That's not even, they've already approved it. We're sending it back. And according to them, who they do it for a living, I don't, they said, we don't see, actually, to be honest with you, I have a text from the representative in Richfield for the Forest Service from a couple weeks ago where he sent our proposal back to the representatives in the Washington office, and they preliminarily said, looks good to us. So this is a lot further along than we're just talking about stuff. Like those private lands in the middle are already stamped and everybody's on board, and we're sending it back. What we're working on is just squaring up the outside boundaries on a different proposal. But the islands in the middle, everybody's on board. We're taking the island out and we're putting it in the middle, and everybody's okay. So yes, that's already been that's been proposed. Everybody's on board. The Washington representative did a preliminary look at that, and they said, looks good to us. We just have to kick it with signatures back to them, and then they take whatever time they need, whether it's a year, and then they kick it back to us. They said something that small, 160 acres, they said it would probably take about a year for us to send back and get a response by next summer that, okay, it's okay with us. And so that's already that far along in the process. That's not just talks we're having. So we're going to fix the problem of the islands.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mike, Kyle, that you'd like us to add?
I appreciate it. I just want to say thanks. I know I've been driving this boat for a long time over the last year, and I know all of you gathered here today because of my battle to get this done. And so anyway, I appreciate you taking your Thursday morning and traveling here. So
Thank you. And you've both done really good. Give us a lot to think about. I guess we'll adjourn over to the room next door and deliberate and come back and let you know what we've beat each other up over.
Thank you all
Okay,
for your
thank
time.
you. I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Wildlife Board meeting on, today is August 22nd, 2024. We've just convened. We're looking at a request by the Kimberly CWMU, and we've come to a conclusion. So appreciate everybody that's been involved in this. It's been a pretty tough process to go through. And so we appreciate everybody's diligence and their willingness to help us with this. So with that, we have discussed it. We've talked about it. There's awesome reasons on both sides. We do appreciate that. So with that, I'll call for a motion on this topic.
Mr. Chair, I move to make a motion. I move to deny that Kimberly Elk CWMU elk variance requests for the reasons set forth in the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources response to Kimberly CWMU request.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion made by Bryce, second by Brett. Hopefully got the motion on. Stacy, we got the motion? Yes. All right, we'll call for a vote. We'll start with you, Kent.
Yes.
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 No, and I do just want to explain a little bit on my my no vote. So at the time that I did vote yes to deny the variance, I kind of felt the pressure of the floodgates opening, and we might open up a lot of opportunity with the change in the rule and with the unique property that the Kimberly is, just that there's not a lot of private available, and it's kind of about the only opportunity he could to partner with DWR. So I feel like it would be a successful union there. I feel like the property could support the elk hunts, and it would work, and it would be beneficial for public and private, because I do believe he'll put in the time and effort to make it a good property with the habitat and water. So I do think it would have worked. So that's kind of my focus on it. In the southern area, it's a little different than northern CWMUs on some portions, just with the amount of public that's there. You know, there's private is kind of a limited resource in that area. So anytime we can partner there, I feel like it's a good thing. But definitely appreciate your time. I know you've gone into a lot of time and effort on this, Mike. So thank you for putting in that time and effort. And you know, I hope good things come your way.
Thank you, Paula. With that being the end of our meeting, that's our last topic, agenda item today. I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We've got two. We've got one made by Kent, one made by Brett. I guess one's a second, one's over. All in favor? Brett?
Yes.
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 Kent?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.